Heading into this season, the Bills traded away or released several starters, and many people assumed that this would be a step back, a retooling year, not quite a rebuilding year for them. But now, heading into Week 16, Josh Allen is the MVP frontrunner, and the Bills have beaten the 1 seed in both the NFC and the AFC within the past 4 games. The question is how? What changed from offseason to now, and what stayed the same from last season to this season? And why were the Bills successful when the assets added seemed like significantly lower tier than the assets lost?
Yeah, I'm going to kick us off with the offseason departures for the Bills this preseason, last year's offseason. And, there were big names, like you said. There's the Stephon Diggs leaving. There's Gabe Davis leaving. So you already got your 2 main receiving yard leaders for the team of last season out the door. And you are losing Leonard Floyd, an edge that you got and was very productive for you. You're losing Trey White. You're losing Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Mitch Morse. Like, you're losing a good amount of defensive players that played for you. You are losing a pretty main centerpiece of your offensive line. I feel Mitch Morse is a name that isn't like scoffed at. This is a good player. And while the DBs may or may not have the same drawing power as the rest of the roster I kind of listed that was leaving the team, if you look at this departures list and you read this out and you imagine like a team with all of these players, you're imagining a pretty good team. You're not looking at this and being like, oh wow, they're really cutting off some of their bad contracts or cutting off some of their worst players. Like, these are the main departures that you look at and you're like, oh wow, okay, receivers gone. You're looking at some defensive production that's going to be missing. And then, do you want to cover like the people that they had come in for this? Because these aren't big names. These do not match the same draw.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have these names listed, and I was like, if this is either their entire free agent class or you just like picked some names at random, because there's no way these are the biggest names. But they brought in Curtis Samuel and Mac Hollins to replace Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, somewhat replace them. And then they brought in Nick Morrow at linebacker, Taylor Rapp at safety, and Will Clapp at center. I feel like losing a center is a big thing, even if he isn't the mainstay of your offensive line, just because the chemistry between center and quarterback needs to be good for you to be a good, productive offense. And the center oftentimes will make adjustments or call out blitzers or something like that. Normally they are the captain of the offensive line. So bringing in a new center and bringing in these new, I would still consider these lower tier players than a Gabe Davis and a Stephon Diggs. But bringing these in, you kind of expect a drop off. Like I said, you expect this to be, I wouldn't say you expect to be a full rebuild, because you still do have Josh Allen. You still do have some mainstays on offense. Your offensive line is good. Deion Dawkins. And then you've got James Cook. You've got Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. You've got some good weapons that you're still keeping. But it's definitely seen as a retooling year where you're like trimming off the fat. You're getting rid of the older players who are still good but may not be in your far off future plans. And it's the kind of thing we see from teams where you get rid of these players and you expect to be a step back for a year or two and then better off 3 years down the line, but not necessarily better off immediately after removing these players. And we're going to look real quick at whether or not they are better off after removing those players. So we're going to look at some stats from the 2023 season and then compare them to the 2024 season among various players, and then the overall team ranks. And I know you gathered the team ranks, so I would like to let you talk about the differences in offensive production and defensive production year to year, and then I'll get into some of the individual players and then trends as well.
Yeah, for sure. So last season we saw, and this is the 2023 season in full, because of course we don't have the full season done for the 2024, but this is up to this point, 2024, and the full season of last season. So I'm not like negating the last 3 games of last season. That's their full stats. That's just for this season, I'm only considering up to this point. So for 2023, the team ranked 6th in offensive points per game. That was a 26.5 points per game. And in 2024, thus far, they are ranking 2nd, and they are at 31.8 points per game, which that's a big jump.
That's like a touchdown, almost
Yeah.
adding an extra touchdown every game.
you are gonna go ahead. Those 1-score games are no longer 1-score games. Those are 2-score games. Those are much more convincing wins this year around due to the extra offensive production there. And then that's reflected as well with their yards per game, with the 375 or rounded up 375 yards per game in 2023. They ranked fourth, and then this year, ever so slightly down, but with their resulting in more scores with the points per game going up, they're at 369.6. So round that up to 370. You're only down 5 yards. That ranks seventh on the year, but it's 5 yards. It's not going to be a 1-to-1. They're going to be fifth because they're down. Offensive across the league is different, but you got 5 less yards, 7 more points. I think a lot of teams will take that in this league. Defensively, this is where we saw a lot of that, we'll call trimming the fat happen of that defensive contracts that they had. They were ranked last year, they ranked fourth. They had 18.3 points per game allowed defensively. And then this year, it's 22.1 points allowed per game, but that's 12th. So now you went from being a very top 5, slightly, out of that top 5 into the more middle of the pack defenses, and it's only 4 points. So as a whole, you have gone ahead and given yourself an extra touchdown and allowed an extra field goal. So, you're still feeling good about that ratio, defensive to offensively. This year, however, they have had some injuries to the back end, and I think that kind of explains this next stat I'm going to go over, which is the total defensive yards allowed at 307 last year, and then this year at 345, and that's 9th to 23rd ranking-wise. So now you're dropping into that bottom half of the league in these yardage allowed, and I think, you go ahead and you're losing talent at the DB room, and you're adding talent that is not equal to the talent you lost, and now that talent's getting hurt. So you're going even further down. That's going to allow for more yardage, and I think with that situation itself, you are very happy to be allowing an extra 40 yards per game and only a field goal. That seems very proportionate to me. You're allowing 40 extra yards on one drive, which might have been a punt. Now it's resulting in a field goal. Makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, I think so. I have Josh Allen's season stats from 2023 and then his pace stats from this season. So basically the stat divided by 14 because that's how many games they've played, multiplied by 17 because that's how many games they will play, and that's the pace that he's on, what he should get to if he averages the same amount. I'll put those above us, but there's one stat that I really want to hone in on, and it's one that we've talked about at length this season, and that is his interceptions. Last season, he had 29 passing touchdowns and 18 interceptions. This season, he is on pace for 30 passing touchdowns and just 6 interceptions. So we saw their offense average, we'll call it the same amount of yards per game, because that's essentially what it is. They didn't drop off enough for me to say that they're averaging less yards per game, and they didn't go up. But they are, like you said, averaging almost a touchdown more per game. And I think that comes down to Josh Allen not turning the ball over. They're able to keep drives going for longer because Josh Allen isn't as dangerous with the football. And I think that him losing out on Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, who are more of alpha type receivers, where Gabe Davis is kind of your go downfield and get it guy, and Stephon Diggs is, a diva that wants the ball, but he's commanding the ball, and so you're going to get it to him. Whereas the guys they have now are much more of like, who the hell is Khalil Shakir, right, at the beginning of the season? But now we're like, okay, he's a rack monster. And so this year, they're playing a bit of a different offense because of their weapons changing, but it's a safer and more high-scoring offense. So despite losing the better talent, it's allowed Josh to kind of show what he can do when he's unburdened by top-end talent. And I think that's a real thing that can happen, is you can be burdened by having this guy that you're like, well, we're paying him this much money, and he is this good of a player, so I have to get him the ball, even if it's not the best read. And I don't think we're seeing that as much this year, which is what's leading to Josh playing a much safer game. And I mean, he's on pace for basically the same amount of touchdowns, basically the same amount of yards, a couple hundred less, and basically the same completion percentage with, again, basically the same rushing. So the only stat that's really changed for him is those interceptions. And then another player that I've got here that I wanted to take a look at was James Cook, who last season had 1,500 scrimmage yards and 6 touchdowns. And this season, he's on pace for only around 1,300 scrimmage yards, but 17 touchdowns. So he's on pace for a touchdown a game. And I think that is where we see the difference in scoring for this Bills offense, where Josh Allen's not throwing picks. They're running the ball, I wouldn't say more, because James Cook isn't out rushing last season. It's just that they also have Ty Johnson and Ray Davis that they're mixing in. So I think rushing production on a whole is probably up from last year. But the ability to score touchdowns on this offense has increased while not dropping off their ability to get the ball down the field.
Yeah, when you look at the James Cook specific production with that touchdowns, less so on the yardage, they're not exactly out rushing where they were at last year. They spread the ball around a little bit more, like you had said with Ty Johnson. But when you look specifically at the running of the team, it's slightly different. It's certainly a team that was very primarily in 2023. Josh Allen is where we are going to run the ball through. We are going to get the ball with him. And yes, James Cook had a phenomenal season last year, but he primarily was like, okay, Josh Allen will be the spark plug in the rushing game, because some games they just were not producing whatsoever with James Cook. And I think the main difference has been that Ken Dorsey was fired as their offensive coordinator. Joe Brady took over. And a big part of Joe Brady has been, we are going to make our run game good. We are going to prioritize the run game and keep it balanced, because they want to, when you lose the wide receivers you did, you don't want to be top 5 in, pass attempts when your offense is like looking for something. When you're not down in a game, you shouldn't be overly passing the ball versus running the ball. You should try to keep a good balance there. And I think Joe Brady has definitely embodied that, prioritizing the rush game, prioritizing the balance between offense of rushing and passing, and making sure that they're not a team that's just going to pass the ball all the time, always. But when they do pass, they're making sure that they get it to the right guys and guys that can produce after the catch. And that's something that you have right here as well.
Yeah. So in 2023, the Bills had 46% of their passing yards come after the catch, which I didn't look at like actual league averages for that, but from the couple teams that I clicked through and checked the stats on, it was about that. It was like roughly mid to high 40s. This season, they have increased that pretty significantly. 54% of their passing yards are now coming after the catch this season. And I think that kind of goes along and explains Josh Allen's drop in interception numbers, as well as their continued success through the air. So Josh Allen isn't having to throw the ball as far, and Khalil Shakir is one of the better after the catch runners in the NFL. He's very good at taking a ball and just knowing that there's a lane and getting to it. There was a play against the Rams, I'm pretty sure, where he caught the ball. It was a slant or a drag. It was like a 5-yard catch, and he just immediately took off. And you could tell he knew there was a hole and he was going to hit that hole. And it's different than some receivers where they'll catch the ball and they'll kind of hesitate and try to find the gap. He just inherently knew there's going to be somewhere I can get to, so I might as well hit the gas pedal and go full speed right now so that I can hit that hole and break an arm tackle from a DB on my way to a touchdown. And that's exactly what he did. So his ability to do that and the team's ability to create after the catch has led to Josh Allen passing for fewer interceptions, and the team has been allowed to move off of the big name receivers more successfully while not dropping off in the touchdown numbers. With all of these stats, all of these occurrences, and the trends that we've noticed, the Bills find themselves basically atop the AFC. Obviously, the Chiefs are the 1 seed, but they've lost to the Bills, and I am more confident in the Bills than I am in the Chiefs right now. So, heading into the playoffs, which they clinched division early as shit, man. They are
week
a team.
10?
Yeah, something like that. But they are a team I would absolutely not want to meet if I was anybody in the AFC. And I am curious if there are any Bills fans watching. I know we've got other AFC East fans that watch the videos. There was a Dolphins fan that got mad at us on one of the shorts that we posted, and then the Jets fan that watches. Shout out, by the way, and then me, obviously, the Patriots fan. So if there are any Bills fans that are here watching, if you've watched every game, because I have not, definitely let us know down in the comments what is working for you, what is not working for you, and where you think you need to improve. Because obviously every single team can improve at certain positions, and I'm curious to know where the Bills are lacking, obviously on defense, but where on defense could they improve best. And with that, I believe we will be ending this portion of the podcast, this Bills segment, brought to you by James Cook. Shout out. And with all of that, we will get into the Pick'ems recap. So if you are here for just this podcast segment, we appreciate you, we love you, and we hope that you check out the full podcast.